Imagine walking through a massive, sprawling strip mall at 3 in the morning. The fluorescent lights buzz over acres of empty linoleum, and the silence is so heavy it rings in your ears. For the newest overnight security guard, this crushing isolation was simply the job description. Night after night, he paced the vacant corridors with absolutely nothing to do, fighting off a suffocating boredom. To pass the time, he started studying the surveillance grid. Every security system has physical limits. When a camera is mounted to a stone wall, the surrounding architecture blocks the lens, leaving dark, unmonitored zones known as blind spots. Eventually, his endless boredom curdled into opportunism. He realized he could use these hidden pockets of space to slip designer clothes and shoes into his bag with absolutely zero risk of being caught on tape. He was focused entirely on outsmarting the cameras above, totally unaware of the geography below. Decades before the first steel beams were raised, contractors poured the modern concrete foundation directly on top of an incredibly old, historically dense forest. By mapping out the unrecorded corners of the building, he easily hid his thefts from the eyes of management. Stepping into the dark, however, placed him in the perfect position to be noticed by the ancient things that still lived in the soil underneath. The first sign of trouble came on a night when the building was entirely locked down. The air in the main hall suddenly grew thick, and the distinct sound of children giggling started echoing off the glass storefronts. Thinking a group of kids had somehow bypassed the exterior locks, he drew his weapon and swept his flashlight across the pitch-black retail aisles. He looked everywhere, but he found absolutely no one. This diagram illustrates a concept paranormal researchers call a residual haunting. Instead of an active spirit walking the halls, the environment itself acts as a massive, natural hard drive. Researchers refer to this as the stone tape theory. Intense energy loops continuously, devoid of any conscious intent. If those giggles were an environmental playback, he was completely safe. A recording cannot perceive a listener, and an echo poses no physical threat. A few shifts later, his greed overpowered his creeping anxiety. He found a massive blind spot near a storefront and began boxing up a pair of Vans sneakers. Mid-theft, the temperature dropped. He looked up to find a towering, pitch-black mass shaped like a person standing completely still at the far end of the aisle. The figure slowly lifted a long, dark arm, deliberately waved at him, and instantly dissolved into smoke. A purposeful gesture shatters the idea of a simple environmental loop. This reaction points directly to elemental entities, ancient spirits completely self-aware and deeply tied to the natural landscape. Elemental spirits act as the original wardens of the earth. To a territorial spirit, a petty property crime becomes a moral rot, a localized infection happening right on top of their sacred ground. That single, deliberate wave carried a terrifying message. The land beneath the concrete was awake. It was monitoring his actions in the dark, and it was choosing to engage. The terror peaked a few nights later. The guard found himself paralyzed in a pocket of total darkness between the stores, unable to take a single step forward. Suddenly, a loud, perfectly clear voice, positioned directly next to his ear, whispered his full legal name. Discovering a highly specific personal identity escalates the situation into a third classification: demonic attachment. An intelligent, predatory entity has locked onto a specific person rather than a physical location. A guardian spirit might chase a trespasser out of the woods, but it has no use for human birth names. Whispering his full legal name proved the entity in the dark had bypassed defending the dirt to actively profile its prey. The hunting was no longer tied to the physical boundaries of the mall. The entity had isolated his identity, marking his soul for a targeted, inescapable hunt. Absolutely terrified, the guard abandoned his post, sprinted across the massive complex, and locked himself inside the safety of the security office. When he reviewed the tapes the next morning, he found a shocking reality. The cameras only recorded a man running wildly down the halls, violently swinging his flashlight at thin air. The surveillance grid captured zero corroborating evidence.
There was no towering shadow figure in the aisle, no auditory record of a child's laugh, and no voice whispering his name. He quit his job the very next day. Store managers eventually launched an investigation into the missing merchandise, but they never connected the thefts to him. He walked away with no legal punishment, carrying only permanent psychological trauma. We are left with a final, unanswerable question. Did the crushing isolation and paranoid guilt of theft trigger a complete psychological collapse? Or is our surveillance technology simply incapable of rendering the ancient, vengeful things that judge us from the dark?